I remember my paternal grandparents. They were in Seymour, Indiana, but they lived out in the country, and they were farmers. He was a farmer. She was a housewife and did all the things that housewives do, on a farm, and that included, like feeding the chickens and things like that. So, I think they were German, and as far as I know, they were all farmers, going back many years. I think we're about fifth generation Americans. So that would have been in the 1700s, maybe, something like that. So my sister did some work on genealogy, and she had traced our family farm back to Germany, and it was the 13th or 14th century, something like that. And it still was spelled the same way, which is unusual. I was born on June 1st, 1945, and I have three sisters. Two of them are older than I, and one sister is younger than I am. And I was born in, it was on a farm close to Brownstown, Indiana, which is fairly close to Seymour, which is a little bit larger town. I did have another brother, but he passed away before I was born. Back in 1942 or so, he passed away of diphtheria, which was somewhat common back then, but very, very contagious. So when they had his wake, they couldn't use a funeral home. They had to stay at home, and they had his little casket in front of a window so the neighbors could pass by, and so there wasn't any contamination. We went to a private school, and it was a Lutheran school. It was a rural school, and it was probably about 5 miles from our house. And so when we came home in the evening, we would all have chores. We would have certain things that we would have to do before we knew that we could go in, and we would have supper. Dinner was called supper back then. Still is in certain parts of the world. But we would have supper, and then TV wasn't invented yet. Well, TV was invented, but we didn't have one. And so we would spend a lot of time just, when our homework was finished, we would spend time drawing pictures and working puzzles and things like that. I was in charge of hauling in the wood we had a stove that provided our heat. It was central to the house, and this was before a furnace. So we burned wood, and my job was to get in the wood in addition to milking the cows. So I had to milk a couple of cows, and then I had to bring in the wood. And in the wintertime, my dad constructed a sleigh, so I used a sled with the snow to bring in the wood. When we finished our work, then we could come in and we could then have supper and sit. And we always did a sit-down meal. There was never a time that we didn't have a sit-down meal, even breakfast. And then when we were home at summertime, it was a sit-down meal as well. And then in the evening for dinner, it was a sit-down meal. I guess I was in the 8th grade when the school where I went, which was called Sowers, and was named after the first pastor that was there. His name was Sauer. And so the name of the school, the name of the church was Sowers. This was a brand new school when I started. It had 2 rooms. Each room had 4 grades. And probably in those 4 grades, we would have about 40 students. So we had about 80 students overall. And so when I was in the 8th grade, the principal was brand new. So he just had come in, and he had replaced someone who had retired. And so he, I guess, took a liking to me as a leader. And so when I first met him, we talked, and then he said, well, I'm going to make you the leader of the school, and I'll put you right by the door so that when we have a fire drill, you'll be the last one out and the last one back in. And so what your job is to make sure that everybody lines up and goes out in an orderly way, and then you can leave. Well, one day we were in the school, sitting there, and his wife tapped on the door, and so he went to the door, answered it, walked out a little bit, came back in, and he said, I would like to have all the 8th grade boys go with me. And so the 8th grade boys got up, and we went with him. And so we walked about a half mile when we came upon a John Deere tractor that had stopped, had run into a fence row, and had stopped. But in the process of stopping, he had fallen off the tractor, and the tractor had run up on his leg. And so he was pinned under the tractor. And what was behind the tractor was a disc. And if the tractor had kept on going, the disc would have chopped him up. But the tractor stopped. And so he was screaming for help, and so the teacher asked, well, who can drive a John Deere tractor? And everybody pointed at me because they knew that we had a John Deere tractor at home, and I knew how to drive it. So the teacher asked me to get on the tractor and start it up and then back it off very slowly. And so I jumped on the tractor without even thinking, and started it up and backed it off of him really slowly. And it turns out that his leg was not broken because the ground underneath was soft, but he had a really deep gouge in his leg from the track that was on his leg. So that was probably one of the first opportunities in my life when I took a leadership role in something. And I remember where I was sitting when I heard that Sputnik was put in orbit. I was probably about 12 years old, it was 1957, so I was 12 years old. I was in the 8th grade, and so I remember where I was sitting in the house, and I remember when they broke in, and we were watching some program on TV, and they broke into the program, and the newscaster said that the Russians, it was the Soviet Union at that time, had put a satellite in orbit. And this was the first artificial satellite that had been put in orbit around the Earth. That was probably my first indication that I wanted to be a scientist of some kind. Probably a rocket scientist, but at that point I wasn't sure what that was. And so I developed a real love for science from that point on in my life. After the 8th grade, I was the valedictorian of the class, and my principal came up to me one day. It was toward the end of the 8th grade, and he said, "You're the valedictorian. Congratulations." I said, "Oh, well, thank you. What does that mean?" And so he said, "Well, in our graduation ceremony, you'll have to give the farewell speech." And that was, I was very, very shy. When I finished, I know a lot of people came up to me and said, "Congratulations." It was kind of I was still kind of in a fog at that point, about speaking in public. And so when I went to high school, when I took chemistry, that told me that that's the one, that's the science that I'm really interested in. And so I went out and bought myself a chemistry set. And back then, when you bought a Gilbert chemistry set, it was pretty sophisticated. It was had a lot of chemicals that you could, basically when we learned something at school, I could come home and do the experiment. And so that was making oxygen, it was making hydrogen, it was making hydrogen sulfide gas, which is rotten egg gas. And when I got to that point, my mom said, okay, now it's time for you to go out to the woodshed. And that, as I said earlier, that was a shed that wasn't being used for any other thing, and because we had gotten an oil furnace at that time. And so I was out in the woodshed and built myself a lab, pretty sophisticated lab for that period of time. Back then you could go to a drugstore and buy just about any kind of chemical that you were interested in. If you bought those today, the FBI would probably be at your doorstep and would say, why are you buying potassium nitrate? Potassium nitrate is the major ingredient of gunpowder. And so I bought potassium nitrate working in my lab, and I was building model rockets at that time. And so I bought a book that was called Modern Rocketry, Amateur Rocketry for Amateurs. And so I read that many times over, and so then I decided, okay, it's time for me to build a rocket. Well, back then you couldn't go to a Hobby Lobby or any place like that to buy a kit. You had to build your own from scratch. And if you live on a farm, you never throw anything away. So you have a junk pile, and on this junk pile you have all kinds of things. And so I went to the junk pile. So then when I shot it off, I used just a 120 volt line that I had, it was a frayed wire, so I just used one of the little wires on it, and I shorted it out, and that's how I shot off the rocket. So I used the woodshed for the blockhouse, and then I pushed the button, and I heard this whoosh, and I ran out, and I saw a smoke trail going out into the cow pasture. And that I never did find that rocket back. I spent many days looking for it, but I never did find it. So I went back and built another one. And so my sister was dating someone, and so he was there when I built my second one, and it was ready to fire. And so he said, I'm gonna stay outside and watch it. And I said, well, maybe you ought to get behind an iron lawn chair. And so then I heard this kaboom. The rocket had gone up a certain ways, and then it had come back down, and it hit his lawn chair. And she never did marry him, so I don't know what the problem was there, but he never did stick around for that. So that one didn't work too well. And then I went on to college and majored in chemistry. And so I was a lab assistant in college, and I worked with professors who worked at Eli Lilly Drug Company in the daytime. I was in Indianapolis, and so they worked at Eli Lilly in the daytime, and they taught at night. So I was their lab assistant. And when they formulated a test, they gave it to me first to see how long it would take somebody to take it. And so I learned a lot of chemistry that way, taking those tests. And so I spent my time in undergraduate work studying chemistry, and then I went on to graduate school. And in the summer, my dad raised hogs. And so on the farm, I would raise hogs, and then I would use that money to pay for my tuition in the wintertime. So, and back then, tuition was not nearly as expensive as it is today. So it was a private college that I went to. Its name of it was Indiana Central College, and now it's called the University of Indianapolis. But it was affiliated with the Methodist Church, and I studied French when I was in college. That was the foreign language that I took. And so I met this young girl in the French class. And so I sat with her, and so we went through French together, a year and a half of French. And so I would always walk her back to the dormitory, and then eventually it led to, I asked her out to a fraternity party. And so she said, well, I've got a date that night. And I said, okay, that's no problem, And so then the next day, I still walked her back to the dorm, and so she said, would you ask that question again? And I said, well, would you go to the party with me this weekend? And she said, yes. So that started our relationship together, and so we dated the last year in college, and then we got married in 1967, and then that's when I started graduate school. I was accepted into graduate school at Iowa State, and so I graduated on June the 1st. I got married on June the 17th, and so I started graduate school on the 1st of July. So not too much of a honeymoon period in there, so I went on to graduate school and then majored in organic chemistry. I finished graduate school in 1971, and then I decided to go on to become a postdoc. That's a postdoctoral research study at the University of Florida. And by the time I finished the postdoctoral study in 1973, I had 3 job offers, and so I said, I think I want to go to the college. And she said, what? She said, that's the one that pays the least. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. It's a brand new building. I can do teaching, which I loved. It was a good time. We had a good time. After I was at Pikeville College for 5 years, in that period of time, I was chosen as the outstanding faculty member the first year. I received a research grant. I was elected to be faculty association president and things like that. Those were other leadership opportunities for me. I talked about going on the John Deere tractor as my first leadership opportunity. And here are other examples of leadership. So after that, then someone from Mountain View College called me and said they're building a brand new college in North Dallas, and you might want to apply for the deanship there, the Dean of Science and Mathematics. And so the college that we opened up was Brookhaven College. So the college where I went to work was Brookhaven, and so I was the first dean of science and mathematics there. And so I was in that position about 9 years when the vice president came to see me, and she said, well, our vice president has left. Would you be the interim? And she said, now, because you're in this position, you can still also apply. So I applied, and I did get the position as Vice President for Instruction. And so I was in that position about 9 years total, but after about 7 or 8 years, I started looking for a presidency. I applied at Tarrant County College because the president had left there. And so I thought, well, I'll apply here. Well, I didn't hear anything for a while, and then all of a sudden I got a call saying that you've been chosen to be interviewed. And so I went over and was interviewed by a faculty committee. While I was in the interview, I told them, well, I'm teaching a class at night, and so the interview starts at 3. Is this going to interfere in any way? And they said, no, you should be out in time. But that was one of the clinchers for them because they were faculty members. They wanted their president to be a faculty member as well. And so I told him that if I were president, I would want to teach a class every other year or so just to keep my hand in. And so I was chosen for that position. So I became president of Tarrant County Junior College then in 1996, March of 1996. The district was formed in 1965. The first campus was opened in 1967. That was the South Campus. So it opened in 67, and then the Northeast Campus opened in 68. In 1996, when I started working there, it had about, I think, 9,000 students, 9,000 some students. And so the programs that they had at that campus kind of matched a lot of the programs we had at Brookhaven. And so I was instrumental in starting some of those programs at Brookhaven. And so I helped to start up then programs in the medical industry at the Northeast Campus. I started the program with the community, which is the Heart of North Texas Business Conference. And this is a program where it was affiliated with the Northeast Leadership Forum, and a vice president of Texas Commerce Bank and I started that, and it still is going today. The 19th annual Heart of North Texas was in November. So every November, the first Friday in November, we would have a program for the Heart of North Texas is what it's called. It's a business conference. At that time, I had a good partnership with the city of Hurst, and which brings us around to Bill Souter. Bill was, at that time, he was the mayor of Hurst in 1996, and so I remember we had the Northeast Leadership Forum would meet at the Northeast Campus. Every other month we would have a program, and then every other month in between we would have a board meeting at the Northeast Campus. And Bill was always at the breakfast meetings, and I remember seeing him, meeting him, and he asked me where I was from. This was when I first met him in 1996, and I said, well, I'm from Indiana originally. He said, oh, I've got relatives that live in Paoli, Indiana, and they're Souders. And of course I didn't know him, but it turns out that Paoli is about 25 miles from where I was born. So his relatives were born and raised about 25 miles from where I was born. And so over the years, Bill kept running for mayor, and I remember one of the stories about his running for mayor. Jimmy McKenzie was also running for mayor, and Jimmy McKenzie was a faculty member at Northeast Campus. And so he came to see me one day, Bill, and he was very, very concerned about that because he was afraid that he was going to lose because Jimmy had access to a directory. And so I said, well, Bill, if you don't tell anybody about this, I'll give you a copy of my faculty directory, and so just don't say anything to anybody, and I'll give you a copy. So I gave him a copy of my faculty directory, and Bill did win again. I think that was about the last time he ran, something like that. So he thanked me for it, and our relationship wasn't quite the same after that. It was a little bit more rocky, but then when he stopped being mayor, of course we became friends, and we've always been friends for a number of years until he passed away. The Northeast Leadership Forum was made up of about 120 leaders from Northeast Tarrant County. So it was made up of mayors and city council people and CEOs and people like that. The Northeast Leadership Forum was started probably just a few years before I came, probably about 1990, 1992. But then the Heart of North Texas Business Conference was something that we started when I came, and it's still going on today. Our focus was kind of on economic development and transportation healthcare and things like that. It turns out that a lot of the policymakers were also members of the Northeast Leadership Forum, and so we had Congress people who were members, and when we brought programs that they could listen to and programs that they could get a feeling for how is the population responding to this sort of thing, in that way I think we did influence what happened in Northeast Tarrant County. As a member of the Northeast Leadership Forum and being president of the college, I was able to help formulate a lot of the policy that originated from Northeast Tarrant County and in this area. We were able to do a lot of things, like for example, we drilled some wells on campus. And so that brings us to the gas wells that we had 2 gas wells on our campus, one in Hearst and the other one in North Richland Hills. So the city of Hearst came to see me one day, and they said, you've got a lot of parking space where water runs off, and the water runs right into the sewers. All of the sewers empty into the ditches that make up, alongside the roads in the city of Hearst, and so we're getting some flooding. Anytime it rains, a good rain, we get flooding downstream in the ditches. And so what we need is a holding pond so that the water can wash into the holding pond, and then it's held there, and then it's very slowly released into the streams. We developed a program. It was a partnership with the city of Hearst, probably about I guess it might have been close to the year 2000. We started a program where we had the Hearst Fall Festival on our campus, and so we would have a fall festival. Bill Souter would be there. I would introduce Bill, and he would say a few words and welcome people to the fall festival. But we ran that for about 4 years, and then it kind of outgrew us, and so they had to move it to another location. The TCC started a partnership with the Hearst Middle School, and this partnership was one in which we adopted the school, and so our faculty would go to the Hearst School and would serve as mentors and would also read to the kids and that sort of thing. So we had this partnership going for many years. I was out raising funds with the Salvation Army, and I got a phone call saying there's a building on campus that's on fire, and so we want you to come to the campus, and that building is burning. And so when we rebuilt that building, there were many periods of time in which we would have to have approval from the city to get releases to start up this thing, start up the next thing, and so we got those particular releases very easily because I had such a good relationship with the city. And Alan Uyghur was part of that, and there were a lot of other people who were in the mix at that time, and I could call them up on the phone. It was people that were on my campus for the Northeast Leadership Forum, and I would say, "Hey, Alan, I need to get this thing off the ground," and he would come and would do something that would help get it started. So we've taken stick pins and put them on a map of all the students that we had in our area, maybe one stick pin for every 10 students or something like that. And there would be a very heavy density around Hearst, and then it would become lighter as it spread out from Hearst. The campus had a significant impact on the economic development of Northeast Tarrant County and of the city of Hearst. I don't know how many millions of dollars would have been spent by the students that we've had over the years. When I left, we were the largest campus, and we had about 18,000 students. And so all of those students will go out and will spend money, mostly in Hearst, because that's kind of where they're from. I talked about the pin sticks on a map and showed the density of our student body in Hearst. And so the economic impact was just amazing of what we had in the city of Hearst. I was chairman of the Arts Council of Northeast Tarrant County, and I was on the board 2 different times for about 12 years. And so during that period of time then is when I became affiliated with the arts. And so I would volunteer and would be the MC for some of those programs. And so that's how I got related to the library. I was chairman of the Colleyville Chamber of Commerce first, and then I became chairman of the HEB Chamber and then chairman of the Northeast Tarrant Chamber. I was chairman of the Colleyville Chamber first, and that was in the year 2000. Prior to that, I was chairman of the Arts Council. We just worked, the TCC, when I was there, worked with the city of Hearst in many different ways over the years. And we've had interaction with various people from the city manager, Alan Weger, and other people that worked for the city over the years, and it's been a very, very good relationship that we've had with them. I would have a chemical symbol, first of all, of HU. The chemical symbol H is already taken with hydrogen, so I would have HU. HU is not taken by any of the 118 known elements now. So it would be an element that would be very reactive. It responds to the needs of the community. It would be something that would form very stable compounds. When it reacted with something, it would form very stable compounds, because once the city of Hearst makes a commitment to reaction, then that reaction is one that lasts for a long time. When we first moved here in 1978, that's when I helped start up Brookhaven College. My wife and I decided, well, we'll stay here about 5 years, and I always felt like I wanted to go on to Colorado. I don't know why. I just love the mountains. And in 1978, when I came here, it just felt like home. And so almost 40 years later, I guess, we're still here. And so it's the climate, it's the people, it's all of those things that kept us here all these years.